guys, Stealth here and welcome to WARNO. Let's have a look at the 3rd US Armored Division. This is one of the divisions that is currently available as the early access is about to commence. Stats are likely to change. The game that you're currently seeing is pre-early access, so they're probably going to be doing a balancing round on the stats, availability, stuff like that. Now, if you're coming from Wargame Red Dragon, you might be used to picking a nation and then picking a specialization. That's not how this works. You pick a specialized division. So in this case, it's the 3rd US Armored Division, or US 3rd Armored Division. When you're looking at your Logi tab, you can see that you have a command helicopter, a command, let's say your basic command jeep, and a command APC. Where are the other commands? Well, spread out across infantry tabs, you have the engineers leader and the mechanized rifles leader, and you have a command tank, M1A1 CP. These guys are spread out over different tabs, so don't expect to find all of your command units in the Logi tab anymore. What I'm going to be doing with this video is just going over the units. I'm not going to be specifically building a deck, because it's so likely to change that the deck availability and just building a deck is not that likely to be useful at this point. Let's go over some of the transports. We got the M35 supply, just your, I think, 4-ton truck. 800 supply in this one. We got, interestingly, an APC supply. Also 800 supply points, same price as the M35. You are, however, paying speed, although interestingly not off-road speed, which is what I was expecting when I compared these two. You got the M35 at 54 kilometers off-road and the 113A2, same speed, but it is slower on the roads. You are, however, getting a bit of armor. And then we got the big Hemmet. Hemmet carries 2500, which is over 3 times what these other guys carry, but you're paying slightly less for it. And this thing is far more capable of going off-road at 90 kilometers an hour. The M151 command is not that special. I'd be careful looking too closely at the autonomy, because it says 16 kilometers. If you're coming from Red Dragon, that's going to look like it's completely laughable. But I think we're just going to have to get used to a different scale. M577 command point, or command APC, not that special, decent amount of armor, autonomy, laughable. Aside from that, not too special. Supply Blackhawk, and we got a command Blackhawk. Command Blackhawk, pretty fast, decent autonomy, and you can get this thing armed as well. So it has 2 medium machine guns, sadly no minigun. On to more interesting tabs, such as infantry. Now, you have a couple of, well, I'm not going to call them reservists, but I'm not really sure how to put these. They are Class D, which means that they are poor infantry units. These are military police. Let's see if I can get the camera on them a little better. They come with an M16 ×4 and 1 M60. It's a 5-man squad. They have normal optics. They have no anti-tank weapon. They're 20 points. Then you're paying another 25 for the transport. I don't really see the benefit of these guys. Maybe you're going to try and push them into contact and then, I don't know, have a tank or other fire support unit help. I don't know. You also get them in the M67 variant, in which case they give up their M60 in favor of getting an M67. Now, something else that you might, if you're coming from Steel Division, might be used to, but if you're coming from Red Dragon, you're probably not. If you select the veterancy, over here, down on the bottom left-hand side, you can see Experienced Veteran. This immediately impacts the unit card. So right now, the unit at Veteran has a 50% accuracy on the M16, and it has a 50% accuracy on the anti-tank weapon. If you go to Elite, it immediately translates what the new accuracy is. So it gets 60% there and 60% there. And especially once we're getting to the tank tab, this is going to lead to some ridiculously high levels of accuracy. You got an engineers leader, not particularly interesting. It's just a command infantry unit, 5-man squad. You can transport them in either an APC or the 4-tonner. You got your standard engineers, and these are more interesting. This seems to be the US way to clear buildings, or at least one of the US options. Because you have Satchel Charges. These are demolition charges with a range of only 70 meters. I think that's still pretty damn far to throw a Satchel Charge, but okay, these guys can do it. You can transport them in the M35 or an APC. They are Class B. They're considered good infantry units. Of course, don't really throw them up against a tank, because they are completely harmless to a tank. They might throw their satchel charge at it, but beyond that, they're not that likely to do damage. Also, why this man has half a mustache, I don't quite know. Engineers, with the flash weapon, they're a smaller group, but they carry the anti-infantry flash weapon, which has a far greater range, 530 versus just 70 meters. And then you got them with the dragons. This is a 10-man squad, for some reason considered mediocre. I mean, they're all engineers, but these guys with the dragon are considered mediocre. Very much an anti-tank team. They have 6 Sakhalos missiles of the M47 Dragon 2, 18 pen, 1590 range. Now, when you're looking at Red Dragon versus WARNO, I find that in WARNO, the infantry can take far more of a beating from a tank. I've had infantry shot at in the open, so normally in Red Dragon that would be 4 HE damage per shot from that tank, basically wiping out an infantry squad in 3 to 4 shots, depending on accuracy. In WARNO, not so much. Absolutely not. Infantry just seems to take 1 or 2 units of casualties per shot from the tank, and again, this can get balanced. Anyway, the Dragon is a pretty potent missile, especially if you get these guys at a nice amount of veterancy. You can get a 62% accuracy, which is something that, for example, a Milan can only dream of in Red Dragon. We also have the standard fire team. Mediocre class. You got the M16, the M249 for anti-infantry. Now, this one has a CQC tab, so close range weapon. You can use it in the same block. The M249 cannot. But they do get an anti-tank weapon, which you can use to blow up vehicles, provided they get close enough. And provided that, ideally, you get a side shot, because 13 AP is not really going to do that much against most vehicles. Transport-wise, you only get the Bradley. Now, the infantry is going to be 40 points, but you're paying 90 points for the Bradley. And that is an expensive beast. But it is a potent beast at that. The Bradley can do quite a lot of work for you. You can see the stats of the Bradley. It has an autocannon, it has the TOW 2 missile, and interestingly, it also comes with a machine gun. As a wargame player, that's something new. The TOW 2 missile is deadly. 25 AP, 2650 meter range, keeps you well outside the main gun range of most tanks. And you get, if you get these guys at veterancy, and let's just set them at elite, you can see what sort of accuracy you get 105% accuracy. So this means a guaranteed hit, I guess? Again, this is something that I suspect might change over the next either few days, months, or even years. Moving on, you got the fire team with the law, that's the one I showed you, and then we got the one with the dragon, which is basically the same weapon as you see here, just in a squad that is transported by a Bradley. Same amount of points, but this is a 10-man squad, this is a 6-man squad. The advantage is these guys also get a machine gun, a light machine gun that is, and they get transported by a Bradley. These are cheaper because you can get them in either an APC or your flat-out truck. Aero Rifles is currently for the US Armor the only option to get aerial infantry. Armed with this M72 Law, useful for early land grabs or to potentially get into a flanking position. Drop them off with their transport, which is the Black Hawk, and you can very quickly get a nice amount of terrain. Of course, against tanks, they're not that useful. They get the M72. Ideally, I would drop, for example, a fire team or an engineers group with a helicopter, but I suppose that's going to be the purview of an airborne deck. Then we got the Mech Rifles. These guys are poor quality, the leaders, but the standard Mech Rifles are not. They are excellent. They are a 11-man squad. You got 8 M16s, you got 3 M249s, and you get 8 missiles for the Dragon 2. They're transported by either the M35 or the M113, and I would definitely recommend using a couple of these in your deck to scout out ahead of tanks. Artillery, well, we don't have that much. You got the mortar, 70 points with a range of 7.5 kilometers. Some of the maps, that means that if you park these things somewhere in the middle, they can hit everywhere. They carry 75 shells, which should be enough to keep you going for quite a while. The hand icon that you see here means that the unit has to be stopped in order to use that weapon. And, well, autonomy, again, not particularly useful, but should be sufficient. Note how none of these units, at the moment anyway, have an amphibious tag. So, based on what I'm seeing there, plus, considering that there are, well, I think no rivers on the maps, or at least I haven't seen any, amphibious warfare is not a thing in WARNO. If you need something bigger to shoot at the enemy, you get the M1A1 in this deck. Sorry, in this division. It's not strictly a deck. You get the howitzer with 21 kilometer range. They do more damage. You got 2.32 as opposed to 1.6. That also gives you a higher suppression value. Rate of fire is 9 shells, but if you compare that to the mortar, they do twice the amount of shells. This is something that you use if you want to do a bunch more damage. Interestingly, you can give command over your artillery, and that goes for all 4 of them, to the AI. Why would you want to? Well, you have a nice button called Counter Battery. And in that case, a unit is going to immediately, when it has, let's say, a launching location from either an MLRS or a firing location from an enemy mortar or howitzer, it's going to shoot back at that site. It's going to do that all by itself. The only thing that I haven't seen it do is relocate after firing. It does not scoot and shoot. So keep in mind that while it might be very useful, if the enemy also has their counter battery set up automatically, you might be effectively counter batterying each other into submission and nobody has any artillery left at the end of the game. So use that button, but make sure you move your arty. And then we get 2 different units of MLRS. For some reason the comparison thing doesn't really want to work. Here we go. Come on. There. You got the standard M270 MLRS with HE, and you got the MLRS cluster with anti-tank weaponry. Keep an eye on the amount of ammo that they carry. That is 36 missiles. There were already questions in the comments asking, hey, do these things need to be resupplied? And if yes, how do you do that without a fob? Well, I suppose you can resupply them from a logistics vehicle, but the question is, do you need to? And I think you might not, because you got so many missiles, and, well, you got a huge price tag, which kind of warrants the price of the artillery, including the price of a fob, if you will. That means that you don't really have to pay too much attention to having these things resupplied. It also means losing them is far more pricey, because you're effectively losing 400 points in the case of the standard M270. The cluster one is cheaper. So keep these things safe, if you will. Now, we're an armor deck, so let's get to the tank tab, where you might find some vehicles that you don't really expect to be there. The anti-tank vehicles. WARNO had an AT tab / vehicle tab, and that's now gone. I guess they decided to merge that into the tank tab. So it's both a tab of tanks and of anti-tanks. And then we got the CEV, which is something that you normally find on the infantry, on the vehicle tab in Red Dragon. But in this case, yes, it is considered a tank. It's just not a tank that does damage to enemy vehicles. It does do damage to enemy infantry, and it does that quite nicely. Rate of fire on this thing, currently, very nice. 10 rounds a minute rate of fire means that you're going to melt infantry very quick at a pretty safe range. Because this is 1765, and let's say that you're fighting another US deck. You're out of range of the dragon. That is very nice. Now, let's go over the anti-tank vehicles. You got the M901 ITV and the M901A1. Pretty much the same vehicle, just a different weapon. One has the ITO, the other one has the TOW2. Again, veterancy matters. You get them at the lowest veterancy available, which is trained. They're going to have 70% accuracy. Then we go up to 87, and then we go up to 105. But this also increases your rate of fire by 30%. It also means that, as opposed to just getting 6 of them, you're now only getting 2. So make your choices wisely and adjust your strategy as such. Because these guys, if you get just the 2 of them, they can be an incredibly effective anti-tank weapon. But if you lose one of them, well, you might have just lost a lot of zoning control. Moving on. This is the most expensive tank, not necessarily the best tank. This is the M1A1 CP. If you compare that to the M1A1 HA, that is their main battle tank. They get more armor, they get more pen. You get 20 pen, you get a good amount of range, and if you get these things at high veterancy, they get a terrifying 97% accuracy. Now that is in their most ideal circumstance, and that is in a circumstance where they're not panicked. Whether this is going to translate to an actual 97%, I kind of doubt, but okay, here we go. They also get a whopping 14 rounds a minute rate of fire. That is a lot. If you're coming from Red Dragon, I'm going to say it again. If you're coming from Red Dragon, you might be used to some bigger encounters. So just having, let's say, 4 tanks in this tab, if you're going to go for these all at Elite, is a bit awkward. This is taking a few cards. So I'm taking 4 cards and I'm getting 1 tank of each. But they're all Elite. So they got that really high rate of fire and that high accuracy. But an anti-tank plane will still make short work of it, because they are extremely lethal to tanks. So it means that you're going to have to really babysit your Abrams and make sure it survives. Because it is an expensive investment and you don't get that many of them. But you don't get these huge encounters that you might normally get in Red Dragon, where you could have, for example, 20 versus 20 tanks slugging it out. You don't really see that anymore. The next tank is the M1A1. Compared to the HA, it's missing some front armor and side armor, and its gun is slightly inferior, but they are more numerous. Because even at Elite, you get 2 per card, and this is going to really go into how you want to play this deck. I would personally pick the M1A1 HA with high veterancy, so Elite. But if you want to, you can also go with another option, which is deleting all of those and going with a whole bunch of these. And when I say a whole bunch, I mean you're going to get, well, 6 times 6 is 36 tanks. Good luck fielding all of those. It's going to be more of a strength in numbers tactic. And with 19 AP, you might want to close the distance or try to get a side shot. And then I think we have everything concluded but the 728, which, as mentioned, is an anti-infantry vehicle. It does a lot of damage, but it's not strictly very survivable at just 13 frontal armor. Reconnaissance options. We get infantry units, scouts. They are available for 40 points, but that means that they're coming without a transport. And on a map where your infantry unit is not very quick, you probably want to get a transport, but all of a sudden you're going to pay at least 25 points for the cheapest one, 75 for the Black Hawk, or the 113 at mid-ground for 45 points. The scouts themselves, not terribly special, just your 4-man strength squad. Exceptionally stealthy though, that's nice. Passive spotters, I wouldn't really send these guys out there to fight anything, because they're probably not going to live for very long. We get 2 options, we get the ACAV and the M150. M150, interestingly, has a tow on it. A standard tow, so it's not the tow 2, but with some veterancy you can still get a lot of accuracy out of it. And 17 missiles rate of fire seems a bit over the top, considering you're only carrying 8. I'm not sure if this is accurate, but we'll just have to see. The M113A3 is a cheaper vehicle, but still armed with an anti-tank weapon. You got the recoilless rifle, doing 13 damage. It's an okay weapon. It's the same one that the military police carries. You got the OH-50C Scout and the Kiowa Warrior. The Kiowa Warrior is deadly. I have been on the receiving end of it from the AI, and it knows how to use it. Be careful of those Hellfires, because they will wreck your tanks very quickly. Ground range is fantastic. If you need something cheaper to scout out, I would just recommend the OH-50HC Standard Scout. It has a minigun. It's still a good spotter. It doesn't have the same exceptional optics like the Kiowa Warrior does, but overall I still find it sufficient. And then you get the M3a1 Recon Bradley, if you will. This recon unit, very good optics, an okay amount of armor, just don't make it fight a tank. Or if you're going to fight a tank, do it at range. You can either get currently 6 at the lowest veterancy of trained, or 2 at elite. Again, at elite they have more than 100% accuracy. I guess you're going to hit not just one tank, but the next one after it. I don't know. It's an almost guaranteed hit or something. They are pretty good. Off-road speed, very nice. On-road speed, 79, that's very good. Mediocre stealth, you get very good optics. It's a pretty expensive unit at 135 points, but it will do the job. And especially if you kill one tank with a TOW 2 missile, and considering that you are going to be the spotter, you're likely to kill it before it kills you, then you can easily recoup the cost of this unit. NTR, what we got? We got the Stinger C. The Stinger C has has no transport options. We just get the transport jeep. You can get these guys, either 12 of them or 4 of them at Elite. And considering that I've only played smaller scale engagements, I think that 4 of them at Elite is the way to go. It's going to cost you 45 points. They too get 105% accuracy. Again, don't look too deeply into that. 8 Stingers on this 2-man squad seems like quite a lot of missiles. And you still get the Jeep. The Jeep is not terribly useful, but it does have an M240 that can help suppress enemy infantry. Next option is the Chaparral. Yes, the Chaparral is cheaper than the Pivads. The Pivads, I think, might be more expensive because it's capable of also engaging ground targets. I'm not exactly sure why the Pivads would be more expensive than a Chaparral, because it is not more accurate. The Pivads has an accuracy of 6%, which, if you can get it Elite, goes up to a whole 9%. So yes, we're definitely going to hit something eventually. Just don't expect it to do that soon. Rate of fire is very high, but ammo supply is not. So keep a close eye on these things, babysit them with a supply truck, and keep them going. The Chaparral, if you can get these guys at decent veterancy, are going to have a pretty low amount of accuracy. I was expecting something a bit better, but this is what we get, 45%. So be it. And finally, yes, you get a helicopter in the anti-air tab. This is the OH-58CS that you might know from Wargame. It has the 4 Stingers. It's an okay anti-air platform. Nice for hunting down enemy helicopters. I wouldn't really use it against an aircraft, although it can do that. Our own helicopters. We get the AH-1F Cobra and the AH-1F Tow Cobra. The AH-1F Cobra for 60 points carries a couple of rocket pods and some Gatling. It's not much more special than that. The Tow Cobra gets the addition of a ground-to-ground missile, although I think that's an air-to-ground missile considering it's mounted on a helicopter. But it sacrifices half its armament of Hydra rocket pods for that. So use this one if you're facing infantry. Use this one if you're facing a tank. If you're facing a bigger tank, you use the standard Apache, AH-64A. This is basically your Tow Cobra as opposed to the Apache rocket versus the standard, or versus the, I'm going to call this the standard Apache. You got the M230 on both, you got Hydras on both, but one gets more Hydra rocket pods, the 80-pointer, and the other one gets, for 245 points, 8 Hellfires. These Hellfires are not fire and forget. They need to be guided to the target, so if your Apache either has to disengage or has to die, then you're not likely to get a hit. If you need a lot of tanks dealt with, you get the AH-64A. This one has, considering the only veterancy level that you can get is veteran, 87% accuracy. That is pretty terrifying, so if you're playing red and you're facing an Apache, get this thing damaged as quickly as possible to just bring that accuracy down. The helicopter itself is also pretty survivable at 1 armor, and I found that machine guns just don't do the same level of damage against armor that they used to. It's no longer a couple of M113s bringing down an Apache. I suppose you can do it, but it's gonna take you either a lot more time or a lot more transports, because this Apache with the M230 is deadly to transports. Finally, the air tab of this particular division. You get a couple of different loadouts for the F4E. This is the HE loadout, giving you a couple of Mark 82 bombs. 227s, they're okay, dealing with infantry, but anything bigger is not that likely going to take offense. If you need a vehicle dealt with, you get the cluster variant with a couple of Rockeyes. Again, it's 227s, but it is 9 pen. That is very lethal to tanks. And you can even do some light air-to-air. They can all do that, by the way. And this is the Napalm, dropping 2 canisters of Napalm on the enemy. If you need more HE, you get this guy. You get 12 227 kilogram bombs. Again, it's not strictly going to be one of those 1,000 kilogram bombs that you might be used to from Red Dragon, from, I don't know, a Deagle, for example. But it's more of a carpet bomber, so if you got a larger swath of units that you need to be stunned, this is the go-to aircraft. The cluster one drops more cluster. This one drops 8 as opposed to the mere 2 from the Phantom. But then again, you're almost paying double. And the Phantom can still do some air-to-air warfare. This one has no option. Finally, the Napalm. Basically a double variant of the F4E Phantom 2. Two versions of the Thunderbolt. This one carries bombs. We haven't seen them do that before, save in a few mods. But it is a nice ground support aircraft. It also has the favorite GAU-8 Avenger, which can deal 1 pen, but it is kinetic. So the closer that you get, the more damage that you will do. This thing can chew through tanks. It can also deal some damage against aircraft. It can deal either with helicopters or aircraft, dealing an okay amount of damage, but keep in mind the value is greatly reduced by armor. Hinds have armor. Apaches have armor. Your HE is not simply going to translate into, I'm going to kill this helicopter right quick. But I imagine that a Gatling gun will do just that. The other option is the Thunderbolt 2. This one carries the air-to-ground missile, the Maverick. It's 26 AP, and it is pretty accurate. I would recommend taking these at Veteran, because then you get 50% accuracy as opposed to 40%. You also get a slightly higher rate of fire, but you also get more accuracy on the main gun and the air-to-air missile. So that leaves these things at 75% accuracy, making a Thunderbolt pretty deadly. Keep in mind, however, the Thunderbolt is slow, traveling at 420 kilometers an hour. And they even get some ECM at 20%. What do we use to deal with enemy aircraft? The F4 Phantom E air-to-air version. 2 AIM-9Js and 5 AIM-7 Sparrows. These have a range of 3.5 kilometers. These have a range of more than double that at 7.7 kilometers. They are not very agile. If you want something agile, you use the Thunderbolt. That's a ground support aircraft. This one is more of a, I'm going to chase that down and get the hell out. They're very fast, 1229. They're not as fast as the MiG-31 that the Russians get, but it is still a very fast aircraft. 20% ECM, nice amount of fuel. Not exactly what the trajectory is. Oh, travel time to the map, that's 8 seconds. If you compare that to the Thunderbolt, it's going to take 19 seconds to just get to the map. This is now a factor that you really need to keep in mind for aircraft. The longer your trajectory, the slower your response time. So if you see a tank out in the open, you're first going to have 19 seconds of travel time to get the Thunderbolt to the map. And then it's going to have to traverse the map to the point where the tank is, and that needs to get killed. It's going to potentially take you upwards of 60 seconds in order to get this thing on target. So that's the F4 Phantom 2. And finally we get the Wild Weasel, which is your seed aircraft. Range to tanks, or range to ground vehicles, 4240. Very decent anti-radar plane. 40% ECM. Again, it is fast. I would just have these things do a sweep if you're going to be using a lot of aircraft. But in an armored division deck, I probably wouldn't spend this many points on a Wild Weasel. If this was an armored deck, I would probably get something like the HE Phantom at medium veteran. I would probably get no cluster aircraft, because if I win another tank dead, I bring one of my tanks. I would probably bring the A10 and probably this. Let's see, yeah, that's just the 2 of them. Or just the single one or 3 of them. There. That's probably what my air tab would look like. Alright, that's going to conclude the US one that we have so far, which is the 3rd Armored Division. I'll be doing another video on the USSR version very soon. If you have any questions, let me know down below. Keep in mind, all subjects or stats are subject to change, so if you're watching this thing in a couple months' time after it came out, you might be looking at something very, very different. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, post them below and I'll see if I can answer them. And I'll see you guys soon for more Warno.